Did you RSVP to Kaylee today, yesterday?
Yesterday.
Okay.
I can't make it.
Doug's going, Colleen's going, and Ryan's going. Are you going to come?
What's the date?
It's Thursday, right?
It's Thursday.
Thursday.
July, folks, out of town. Unless there's no day.
Thursday at 6.
July.
All right, so this is our first budget work session of the fiscal year. So obviously a good time of year, and we have a great process that hopefully will be relatively smooth for us all to follow. For those of you who are unaware of the process, and those of you who presided over it for many years, it should be relatively familiar. So we'll start off. I'll go to our budget work session doc. You can find it there in the first link, and it's viewable as well. So what is our process? Our process is to review the focus of our budgeting, to discuss some of the phases that we go through, to look at our first draft with the revenue sources that we're anticipating along with our projected expenses. And then this year we do have some additional considerations to bring to the board's attention, and then we'll just wait another month and refine the process as information comes in. So on that note, when we talk about the focus of our budget, we have a lot of different focus areas. We are in the second year of our strategic plan, so that's a 5-year plan, and supporting goals of academic excellence, innovation, and well-being is certainly at the foremost of that plan. The board has annual goals that we work in the service of, and as superintendent, I have goals in the furtherance of those efforts as well. We are in year 3 of a community school initiative, our ongoing community schools effort, so that is a component of our budgeting. And then there are just some philosophical components that we incorporate into the budget. So we ensure that we do what we can to meet the many needs of students. We work towards a collaborative improvement process, and we realize efficiencies when it's practicable and when the impact upon student programming is not significant, so that we can be good fiscal stewards to the taxpayers, but also provide the very best programming for our students. And we have some ongoing priority areas, some of which have started in years past. Certainly we'll continue with the science of reading at the elementary school and up to grade 6. Civics is an ongoing component of our discussions this year, so you can expect to hear more on that topic from me in the next 2 board meetings. I'll have some additional updates. And then, of course, we have our ongoing English language learner population that is still burgeoning in the district. So how we're meeting those and still continuing to meet the needs of our students. Those are our main focus areas that we are coming into this process with. In terms of the process, it's relatively straightforward. We calculate to the best of our ability with the information at our disposal what our projected revenue is going to be within the confines of the tax cap. And then we bear into account with our budgeting process what expenses can fall within that range. We identify and prioritize any budget items and changes that may need to come as a result of goals that we have. And then we make strategic changes based on our priorities and our available funding. So this gets to the meat and potatoes of the process. And this is a screen that you will see over the course of this process. And progressively, it will become more and more filled in. And so it becomes a little more apparent how owned in our budget is going to be. So Mr. Wood, why don't you take it from here and tell us a little about our knowns and unknowns and our timeline of projection of when we're going to figure out some of these unknowns.
Sure. So the first thing is the CPIU. We get that from the state, so they look at the data, and the CPIU was 2.9%. So our rate of increase is capped at 2 per New York State law. Or, it was all the way back to 2012 is when that first implemented the property tax cap. So we are capped at 2%, but there are exclusions that we can factor in that will typically allow the cap to go higher than 2%. And generally speaking, those exclusions all are wrapped around debt service. If we have debts, whether our transportation lease, transportation purchases, our energy performance contracts, our capital projects that we did bonded. So basically any bonds, any debt that we have, we can exclude.
So is it an installment obligation,
Yes, for the most part. There are some,
Okay,
there are some that you can't include that are
Okay.
installment.
okay,
For example, we, over the last 5 years, we had built into the budget, an equipment installment purchase. We're spending about $15,000 a year, new tractor, new lawnmowers and all that. You're not able to put that as part of the exclusion. Yes. So what you see here, so that's capped at 2%. The tax growth factor, which is, provided to us, to districts by the states. It's part of the formula in terms of finding out what is our maximum allowable levy. So that's at 1.099%. And then, so when you look at those things, one of the detachments that you should have is the property tax levy cap. And it kind of shows you the breakdown of how we get to the number of what is our property tax cap. And right now it's listed approximately at 1.8613%. You ask, well, that's less than 2%. Cap was. So the next line, you'll see that we have to use some reserves from previous year, about $127,000. Basically what happened was, looking back at last year when we figured out the cap, one thing that's changed from the time that it was submitted and we did all this process is transportation aid. What was told of us, what was factored in versus what we actually got, I had to make adjustments based off of that. And as a result of it, it technically reduces what we can ask for from the public this current year by $127,000 because of this change that I had to make. So if you look at it in reality, again, the sheet would show you that I gave you, the property tax cap. We could have, it was basically 2.5% is what our maximum allowable increase would be. Subtract the 127, and that's why we have 1.86%. So basically, we're using some reserve funds that we collected last year through the collection process.
To make up.
To make up the difference
so
for
if the
that.
127 wasn't there, it would be 2%?
Correct, it would be 2.5%. So basically 0.5% higher than our cap because of our debt service.
Okay,
That has changed a little bit over the years, because last year we, so what happened was, we're switching how we're purchasing, buses and all that. So that kind of changes a little bit of it. Plus, as we pay down our debt, that changes how much we pay out every year. So if you were to look at the budget and you look at our debt service, it's down by like 1%. Plus, so that factors into it as well. So going forward, as long as if the CPIU stays above 2%, we're probably going to be trending about 2.5% going forward on any given year for the next few years. Right now, through the executive budget's proposal from the governor, we're looking at state aid of about $3.2 million. That's an increase of just about 3% over last year. $40,000 more in foundation aid. That ended up being, like a 2% $1,000, plus some additional expense aid makes it that increase of about $120,000 in total over last year. Granted, this is the proposal, not until April. We won't know until April 1st when the budget is passed as to what that final foundation aid number is. But historically speaking, the governor's proposal is typically the low end of anything, but I don't envision it going higher in that regard. I was quite surprised that we even got 40% increase for our foundation aid. I would have projected a 0 increase based off of what was being talked about leading up to the governor's release of her proposal. Other things that we know, ERS is, it's about 13%. That varies depending on the tier that the ERS employee is at for their retirement. And then the TRS is the teacher's retirement system. That is, it's about actually 9 0.6%. I rounded up to 10%, for that. So that's basically what the district has to pay in every year for retirement benefits for our staff. We know, because we don't have any all of our contracts are settled. We know that the LPA contract is looking at 4.75% increase in their salary, and the CSEA is looking at 4%, and the management confidential is 3.5%. That's basically the known so far. The biggest two unknowns is what is the health premium increase going to be? It's not going to be a decrease. There now will be an increase. And then what is our BOCES costs going to be? And we won't know that until probably end of February, in March. But I don't think you guys actually even approve the BOCES budget until April 22nd, 29th. Yes. So really, they have up until probably the beginning of April to submit what their budget is going to be for you guys to say yay or nay to.
BOCES costs, are they negotiable at all?
Well, the issue is
Yes.
that they're, it's broken up into different sub-budgets, right? So there's the administrative component, the program budget, and then the capital. So when we look at our BOCES costs here, Dana, is that referencing the admin budget, or is the unknown, or all of it?
It's all unknown. Basically, what I typically do at this stage is I build in a 3% increase
Okay.
in BOCES expenses just to have the starting points. And then
Okay.
we adjust accordingly once we know.
Right.
It's kind of like a built-in, any line I have in the budget that's in BOCES, is a 3% increase. Yeah.
Okay.
And the way that we have a voice is, as you may recall, the administrative budget, all the
Right.
districts vote on that. But the administrative budget is relatively small compared to the program
Right.
side of the house. And so with that, we can either, participate in a program or not. But once we participate in the program, the way in which that budget is built, there are subcommittees that have been formed with the superintendents to try and make that more transparent process. I'd say that's an ongoing effort. But I certainly don't have a hand in
I recall.
the formation of that budget.
Right.
Okay.
And then there's line thing, like there's certain services we get through BOCES and we can say yes or no to those
Right.
each year. So there is some element of us approving or not approving certain lines.
Sure,
But as Tim said, like the administrative budget, we're basically told what that number is. Is what it comes down to.
And one of the important things too is, because we're a member of the FEH BOCES out of Saranac Lake and Malone, like when I see BOCES costs, I tend to just think there, but we send numerous students to CVES BOCES
Right.
in Plattsburgh.
In Plattsburgh.
And the programming that's provided there, the expense of that is significant to meet the needs that the students have. And
Right.
it's a major driver of our budget of late.
Yeah.
So,
There's no federal help, and so there's no unknown about the Department of Education and so forth.
No, so we are a title school, so we do get title funds. We get through, this IDA, special ed. We get about $250,000 to $260,000 for IDEA funds, and then Title I, Title II, those are for general ed students. We get about $200,000 there.
So is this discussion about the Department of Ed going to have an impact on us, or is this a different conversation?
It's typically not factored into the budget of this. We keep it separate.
Yeah.
We don't use that as a revenue driver for it. It most certainly could be a discussion if that, comes to be. But we get it through the state. So basically the federal government gives the states title funds, and then it's allocated, through the state, so the state acts as a pass through for that. Everything I've read and understand is title funds are not going to be impacted whatsoever by any process, whether the Department of Education is around or not. These title funds have been around even before the creation of the Department of Education.
These funds you're talking about, they go to offset our BOCES costs?
They go to offset various costs, like teachers' costs. We can't use it for special ed.
Okay.
So we had two, basically two federal pots. We have the IDEA, which is the Individual Disability Education Act, and we get funds there that we can use towards special education.
Okay.
And then we get title funds, Title I, Title II, Title IV, which are for just programming. We tie it largely to our reading programs and various other software, professional developments. We use a lot of, a lot of purchasing. So we have a title coordinator, Laura Coffin, and we also have a reading program. We have two different reading teachers. Their salaries are offsets through the title.
I'm kind of focusing on Tim's comment about the Plattsburgh BOCES of a big driver
Correct.
budget. So do we get funds that we can apply to that?
We get aid back.
We get
We get
aid
aid
back,
back,
yes.
okay.
So, and that's where, when you look at the revenue side, there's a BOCES aid revenue
Okay.
account.
I got
It's
it.
like $420,000. We get aid on any of our services that we get through BOCES.
I see.
We get that at it's 36% is basically what we get for every dollar.
Okay.
Depending on the program, depending on if it's salaries, it's right. So
Different formula.
different formulas for different services, but in essence, we get 36% back
Okay.
on it. Our special ed students, we can stack them, which is like a Medicaid. And we actually get, in the summertime, we get 80% back of that cost.
I see.
We always see it as a revenue source the following year
Got it.
on that. So yes, if we're spending more by sending students to Plattsburgh through BOCES, we will see greater aid the following year as a result.
Understood.
Yes.
And Don, just to your question, so I know that the initial executive order to freeze funding to the Department of Education was rescinded. So that was within 24 hours of its being sent from the White House. But prior to it being rescinded, the Office of Management of Budget did indicate that the federal funding freeze would not impact critical programs such as Title I and IDEA. So,
Perfect.
yeah, it seems to be moving on two fronts, thankfully for now. So, and then our final state aid amounts, Dana, like April 1st?
Yes, as soon as the state budget is passed, then we get that numbers again. My guess is it's going to be pretty close to what the governor has proposed. I don't see it going up tremendously, and I truly don't even see it going down.
So that gets us to our first draft highlights then. So we're projecting a total budget of 23.2 million, which is a 3.60% increase. And we'll go over that projections doc as an addendum to this presentation. Our property tax levy, we won't have clarity on that until we know what our bus resolution situation is, Dana.
Correct.
Our intent is to secure one additional bus for the coming school year.
That is correct. We have two going back, and Nikki Porcher has indicated that we could do away with one. That's our
Okay.
fleet would be sufficient. We'd go from 12 to 11. So looking at the purchase of one bus.
And then in terms of our,
Another guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Picture.
Heck yeah.
in terms of our state aid, so Dana referenced that of that 23.2, 3.2 is going to be coming from state aid, which is an increase compared to where we thought we'd be last year with a potential reduction for safe, harmless schools, of which we are. We were very concerned, so we're pleased to see this. But you'll note that our total budget projects a 3.6% increase, and roughly 20% of our budget is born from state aid. The 80%, the $20 million, is born from our local tax base. And so the constraint of a 2% tax cap, less $100 and something thousand due to retroactive aid being factored in, effectively means that there's a deficit that we're going to need to account for. And, you know, we've been fortunate over the years to have some rainy day reserves, and the performance on our investments has been fantastic over the last 2 years. They continue to do relatively well on a historical trend. But as of now, we were operating a budget that needs to be pared down so that the deficit doesn't persist over a 2-year period.
So to pare down the budget, the target is the cap. That's the target that causes us to.
That's correct. Yeah, we did not used to be so constrained prior to the cap because school districts could put forth a levy that the programming required, and there wasn't the provision around a supermajority. There wasn't the politicization of local budgets from schools that seems to happen now. You know, that 2% cap is a limiter for us, particularly given that the cost of goods and services and contracts is really more or less 4% for us annualized. So it's a challenge.
But you can override the cap if you chose to do so.
Correct.
It's a political decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a voter decision.
It's a voter decision. Good points.
What is the success rate of districts that have tried to do an override, irrespective of how crazy it was? It's pretty slim, isn't it?
I don't have the data on it.
I think it's pretty
I'm sure the
slim.
data is available.
Yes.
Yeah, and every year after.
Every year they
yeah,
do it.
Yeah, yes, every year after the budgets have been approved or not approved, we do see information about, out of the 700 public school districts,
Right.
well, you know, saw a super majority out of that, yeah. So we
Right.
see that, that data after every budget cycle. I just know typically what you see is schools that could have a 80, 85% approval rate. When you throw in a super majority, if they pass, they
Right.
pass by like 60 to 70%. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
definitely see a swing in the voters.
Well, the community pays attention to it.
Yes, yeah. Not to say it doesn't get passed, it just says you see the percentage of approving it goes down.
So, but that's the focus of our process
Yes,
is,
sure.
you know, to find
Should be.
the opportunities to seek efficiencies and to identify the things that are so essential to the success of our students that we can make a strong case to the community if we need additional funding to support those. So it's the two levers of revenue and expense are constantly in motion. And so, yeah, those are the big pieces that we'll be talking about over the next several months. When we talk about the percentage of the budget, we're always pleased to see that program drives our budget. So that's the goal, with roughly 80% tied directly to the programming and instruction of students. That's what we like to see. We don't like to see an overly administrative heavy budget or a district that's bogged down from, capital encumbrances. So we're pleased to be forecasting in that area. And data year over year, this gives us a sense of our major categories. I will try to contextualize some of these, but I know you will do a far better job. So please interject with me as you see appropriate. So you'll see year over year, our BOCES expenses, we're projecting that those will go up by a little more than 5%. And I assume a primary driver is our use of the CBES BOCES programs.
Correct.
Yep.
I mean, I kind of have an idea of what the pricing is. That line, budget line is typically has been under budgeted just because it's not something where you don't have students going, you don't put a lot in there. And over the years, been trying to adjust that to catch up. So this year, the projection is catching up to what we're currently spending for that program that would come out of that account line. So that really is the biggest driver of the 5.7%. Like I said, basically all the BOCES lines, increased by 3% automatically just as a placeholder. And then knowing the price of that one program, I increased that by $50,000 because I know what the going price is right now.
In the realm of salaries, it's pretty straightforward. When you aggregate the year over year amongst our respective units, there's a little about 3.6% increase. Our benefits, that's our health insurance, dental, vision, workers' comp. This is a shot in the dark to some extent, right, Dana, without knowledge of what our
Correct.
Our health insurance increase is going to be.
Could be anywhere from 0 to 20%.
Or more.
Or more,
Yeah.
jeez.
So we're,
I hope not.
Yeah.
our health insurance, we are a member of a consortium of districts. Dana is our representative for Lake Placid on the joint governing board, and that group is meeting on Monday of next week to have discussions about potential rate setting. So we should know more by our next budget work session in March about that. That will tell us a lot. Debt service, it's going down a bit, so one of our, something fell
Well,
off.
it's just an adjustment in terms of what we actually pay, you know, that changes from year to year, but it's a nominal change. If you look at it, you know, like $28,000 is the difference, so.
And then our technology materials and PD relatively flat year over year. So you can really see that our big drivers are gonna be our salaries and our benefits, and our BOCES costs will play a dominant role too. Our revenue sources, so I referenced it before, but 82% comes from the tax base, 15% state aid, 1% appropriated fund balance, and then 2% from other sources.
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
Hello, good.
If you would sign in.
Sure.
On the far left.
And then just in terms of what's included in this budget formulation, so we have our school meals continuing. Thankfully, the community eligibility provision is maintained. We're maintaining our professional development budget, continuing with our science of reading, maintaining our English as a new language programming, and our stream program, and introducing driver education at the high school next year. So lots of good things. There is one additional consideration for the board, and that's whether or not it would be beneficial to create a capital reserve account for the purpose of purchasing buses and other school vehicles. So there are some benefits to having a reserve of that type. First and foremost, it would reduce our reliance on the fund balance as a source of that revenue. And Dana talked about how exclusions with debt service can be a component of the tax levy. And from a public perspective, a 2% tax cap is a pretty straightforward number. And then you start getting into the fine print of, well, when you have this exclusion, but not this one and this one, that number starts to go up. And then there just becomes a little bit of a lack of clarity about why is that number with the exclusions in there. So purchasing vehicles through a reserve fund would allow us to not have those exclusions be a part of it. So it'd be beneficial. It wouldn't throw that number off. It would reduce our debt service and also reduce some cost savings measures. And ultimately, it would reduce the size of our unrestricted fund balance, which the comptroller wants us to maintain at a level that is quite low for a rainy day fund, but certainly if we could get it down to a more manageable figure through our reserves, it'd be beneficial. Dana, anything you want to add to?
Yeah, it would be a proposition, just like the repair reserve we did a couple years ago where the voters weigh in. For capital reserve, there's a specific amount of time, up to 10 years. In the resolution would read something to the fact, up to $1 million through unassigned fund balance and surplus and all that could be put into that for the sole purpose of just this, purchasing vehicles. And when you look at it, is in hindsight, we probably should have, considered it last year when we were purchasing. We're looking at it as rates aren't going to go down. So if we're looking to lease or purchase, we're going to be over a 5-year period. We're probably going to be spending about, another $25,000 to $30,000 in interest for the price of that vehicle. By creating this reserve fund, as Tim said, we move up to $1 million out of our unassigned fund balance and into a restricted reserve. The state rather have stuff in a restricted reserve than an unassigned fund balance. So it would lower that. So every year when the auditors come in, that's typically the one ding that we typically get is we're above the 4%. Well, most districts are above the 4%. The Rockefeller study that just came out in December, they recommended a 10% for school districts. So to get our unassigned fund balance percentage down to that 10% range by doing this, it sets us up nicely so that we keep it out of the budgets. It doesn't become part of the exclusion. And we're setting the district up over up to 10 years of having funds. So it does help with the overall budget, from year to year, because it's not something we have to put in as a budgeted item.
So that's something we'll continue to talk about as we go through the budgeting process. But any general questions? The first draft or? No? All right. Then Colin can bring us into the regular meeting.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call our regular Board of Education meeting to order. Would everyone please stand for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item is consent agenda. The recommended action is to approve the following items, which are included in the consent agenda. 5A minutes, 7A calendar approval for the 25-26 year, 7C policy second read and adoption 8520, 7E club approval JACT, 7F resolution for the disposal of personal property, and 7G special education. May I have a motion, please?
There you go. I'll second.
Any discussion? If not, please vote.
I'm a yes.
Who's
I got dumped out.
Voted.
So that's 7 yes.
You're in. Yeah. We have our first public may address the board. Let's see if Karen has anything online.
I do not.
I see that we have guests here this evening. Are you here to speak or just listening?
We're gonna listen.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
If so, I was going to read a little short paragraph, but if you're not going to, that's fine. Section for information for the public, there appears to be nothing under that category. So we will move on to the discussion of the Shipman Youth Center lot, and I believe that Tim is going to give us a overview of the relationship.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. So the district and the Shipman Youth Center have a long-standing relationship. Those of you in the community far longer than me know who Tommy Shipman was, but he was a well-regarded member of the community, law enforcement officer, and the impetus for the formation of the youth center really was to ensure that students in the community had a place to go. Particularly when the coverage available through programming and sport, when there were gaps in that. And so at the time, this is over 20 years ago now, a group of community-minded people got together along with the school district, and they had a dream of creating a youth center. And the district saw the value in that and was a component of that dream. And what you see now is the results of that effort. Is the youth center that's been there for decades. And the success and continuation of the youth center has been of great value to the district, particularly when students go from 5th grade to 6th grade. There isn't a lot of programming available for students as prior to the age that we have modified sports available. So there's an opportunity for them to go somewhere. Now, when the building was constructed at the youth center lot, the district entered into an agreement with the Shipman Youth Center, allowing them to use the parcel under the terms of a lease. And in New York state law, it says that school districts have the ability to have a lease and to lease out property for up to 20 years, 10 years with an additional extension. And so this item is on the agenda because our 20 years have lapsed. And We're in a situation now where we have to assess the remedies available to us under law to ensure that both that this valued service to the community can continue, and that the district maintains its obligations under law and ensures that there's no liability for the district if we have an inactive lease agreement. And so for all those reasons, later on in the meeting, we have a resolution for the board's consideration that does two things. The first is that it designates the parcel where the Shipman Youth Center lot is as no longer of need for the district. And the rationale behind that is because the parcel is no longer of need for the district. It has since the inception of the youth center been just the geographic location of the service that has been a partnership service for our students and community. But that is a required component under New York state law before a district can sell a parcel, is to indicate through a resolution that it is no longer of need. The second aspect of that resolution is to authorize me to work with council to proffer a sale to the Shipman Youth Center to purchase the parcel so that they can maintain their service and there isn't a gap in what they provide, but the district, remains in the good standing of the Office of Facilities Planning, which oversees all of our district, property rules and things like that. So we're in the situation in part because of the success of the relationship. I can't put myself in the shoes of those who were here before, but I'm sure 20 some odd years ago, if people would have known that this service would be continuing, they would have been elated. Perhaps we could have found a more long-term instrument legally to ensure that the youth center could continue to operate. But nonetheless, we're here and we're playing the cards that we have. So the last thing I'll mention is, why is this coming up? How did we get there, right? Well, you may recall, certainly because you were so supportive of it, that over the last 2 years, there were ongoing discussions with the community schools framework of the district that we needed to show support for the food pantry that was in dire straits and the thrift shop that had closed as a component of the safety net for the community. And eventually, when we identified the lot as a site for the new Thrive and Thrift building, the natural thought amongst legal counsel was to, well, in order to find the legal mechanism to do that, create that building on school district property, let's reference the historical memory of that, which is to look at what we had done with another partner on school district property, the Shipman Youth Center. And at that time, that's when it was uncovered that the instrument used at the time was the lease, but that the lease has now lapsed. So finding that information and working with council, we've brought ourselves to this point. So unfortunately, the education law on district property is quite prescriptive, and this is the best and only route for the arrangement that we have to continue. Any questions or thoughts about that?
No, just to emphasize, and I'm sure everyone realizes this, that we are not selling the actual building. It's the small parcel of vacant land that it sits on.
Correct.
And I think, just for the general community to understand that. But yeah, no.
Okay, has there been interest expressed by people who support the youth center to buy the property?
I've first received a formal response from the Shipman Youth Center board indicating their desire to purchase, which has been great.
Good.
And I know that just amongst dialogue in the community, there seems to be an interest both in preserving the service and ensuring that sufficient funding is there for them to maintain what they're doing.
I've heard the same thing.
No, and it's wonderful because it's all in one location.
Yeah.
You got the youth center, you have Thrive and Thrift, so it's just serving the community in different ways and on different levels.
Would the sale to them allow them at a later date to sell and create a use that we don't like?
So there are conditions that can be put on a sale.
Reverter clause.
Reverter clauses, that can be a component of that. And certainly, you know, the district's mission and the intended use of that facility can also be a component of accepting bids in terms of that. So there are guardrails that can be put in place so that if that service no longer is maintained, that something illicit doesn't go up in its stead through a sale.
That's easy to do,
Yes.
done all the time.
Okay.
That's all.
Thanks for the
Thanks.
report.
Thank you. Thanks for the update. Moving on to reports to the board. The first is the policy first read 4772 for the graduation requirements. I don't know, Tim, if you have anything here that you want to add? Or...
Sure, I'll just contextualize a couple of these changes. All right, so the first is just a linguistic change. Our prior policy indicated that exceptions for, this is just talking about the graduation ceremony itself, okay? It says that exceptions may be made under extraordinary circumstances. Previously, it said with the permission of the superintendent of schools. And the committee felt that it should be changed to as determined by the superintendent of schools. And primarily that's because permission has certain implications about student participation as opposed to the phrase as determined by. One of the policy review updates we received had a lot of very specific language about if a student does this particular act, then you know, consideration should be given to exclude them from graduation and things like that. And it just was far too, it was removing a lot of the local control that was being suggested. So that was a simple language change. The next one has to do with also some language changes, but still the crux of the issue has to do with, I believe it was last year, case law came out indicating that students who fall under the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, that they are entitled to an education until they turn 22 years old. Previously, it was 21 years old. Our previous language had most of the similar, but it references instead here the CDOS and SACC, which are just language pieces of the Individuals with Disabilities Act that are referenced. But the note that the New York State School Boards Association gave us with regards to this policy also said, like when a student who may be under special education services and they turn 22, under NYSBA's recommendation, that student could be removed from the school during the school year because they turn 22. And the district has a longstanding policy that in that event, we want the student to see the year through. We don't want to be cold in any manner. But it also added a recommendation in the policy update that we also say if a student receives a Regents or high school diploma, whichever comes first, or turns 22, that's the end of their school year. And so we wanted to remove the language, the either or language that would limit how long a student could attend. We just wanted to give them the ability, if it's in their best interest, to stay to the duration of what's permitted by law. So that references that. And the final point is just a triviality, but the policy committee felt it was important to include the board directs the superintendent to develop regulations. That doesn't need to be in there because that's the very nature of the board superintendent relationship. So in effect, these are nominal changes that really just speak to you know, some of the concerns that were brought forth in our policy committee meeting. Nothing that's going to structurally change our graduation, you know, processes.
Thank you. Our next report is information for the board. Under public content, we have the extracurricular activity account that's there for you to look over. And there are a couple of items under executive content that I believe that we will discuss at our February 18th meeting in more detail.
Yes.
Moving on, the last report is our superintendent report. All yours, Tim.
All right, sounds good. So we are in the throes of our winter celebration week, so to speak. Our elementary bomber day is slated for Friday. So on our Blue Bomber Day, students have a choice of going to Scotts Cobble to cross-country ski or sled, to skate at the Oval, to toboggan on Mirror Lake, or to go bowling at Big C's. So thank you to Deanna Brown for working, and Mr. Clark for working on our Bomber Day at the elementary school. It should be exciting. Our Winter Carnival at the middle high school is, of course, something of much anticipation. So our ceremony will begin on Thursday. Opening games and ceremonies and hall decorating all take place Thursday afternoon. Coronation is Thursday evening at 6. And then Friday, there's activities and games for the students, and the closing ceremonies are on Monday morning. Middle school students will be traveling to Whiteface and Mount Van Ho to take part in carnival celebrations there on Fridays. We are appreciative of Florida for their ongoing support of our students in that regard. At the 10th grade level, we are getting ready for our career and technical education presentations for students. So we will have representatives from the Adirondack Ed Center here to talk about the different programs that are available for students. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a near 50-50 split in the number of students entering a field in the trades versus moving on towards college. Yeah, so last year was a particularly trade-heavy class, so it will be interesting to see if the trend continues. That's great. Next week, Dana, Sarah, Sonia, and I will be traveling to CVES BOCES as referenced through our budget meeting. That's where we have several of our students receiving specific behavioral and special education services. So our site visit is intended just to connect with those students. We don't get the chance to see them to the same degree of regularity we do with our locally supported students. And also to review the programs that are there. We know that that is a big driver on our budget, and we just want to understand the manner in which it's staffed and the benefits of that program, so we can continue to evaluate, those services in our discussion. We have a bit of history on the precipice here. We have a student who is dangerously close to scoring 1,000 points throughout their basketball career. Single bucket, right?
I think it's 2 points.
2 points,
Yeah,
yes.
fun.
So I don't want to jinx it, but
Yeah.
tomorrow evening, Seb Sekunchinen, Seb, is 2 points away from scoring 1,000 points in his basketball career. So we're really excited for that. If he achieves that milestone, he will be the 5th Blue Bomber in history to do so. So we're looking forward to that. And then just the last bit, and something that has taken a bit of time, but very excited about. So recently, the efforts of the North Elba Child Care Coalition, of which I'm the district's representative, we submitted an application to the Lake Placid Rotary Foundation to ask the Rotary Foundation to be the fiscal sponsor for the Child Care Coalition. The way that the coalition is set up is the impetus for this project, other than the fact that there was insufficient childcare options for infants and toddlers in our community, is that the comprehensive plan by the Development Commission in the town of North Elba identified childcare as a core issue that needed to be worked on. And so in his role on the comp plan, Dean Dietrich formed this committee under the auspices of the town to identify a path forward for better childcare options. And we took 2 years to conduct research. Roost was assisting us in canvassing families to see what services they would need and what their family planning projections look like in terms of spaces. And we got to a point where the need was present, and then we worked with regional partners to identify who would be interested in expanding programming. St. Agnes School identified themselves as being willing to be the first program operator under the North Elba Child Care Coalition. And at that point, the town and the Comprehensive Plan Development Commission, they had fulfilled their requirement. To investigate this and seek best options. Now that we've identified the best option, it's about sustaining and bringing this option forward. So the benefit of having the Rotary Foundation act as our fiscal partner is that as fundraising and grant efforts are underway, those monies can be placed in an account where annually St. Agnes and other eligible program operators can seek disbursements of those funds if they meet the conditions of an affordable, high quality child-centered program for toddlers and infants. So this is a great step. With the dissolution of that committee, there needed to be a mechanism to ensure the sustainability of whatever came forward. So I just wanted to end that on a positive note and thank the Rotary Foundation for stepping in and supporting.
It's really exciting news. Very exciting. Any other questions or comments for Tim? If not, thanks, Tim. 5A minutes were under consent agenda. Moving on to personnel. Personnel consent agenda. The recommended action: approve the following items which are included in the personnel consent agenda. 6C, CSEA resignation. 6D, amended CSEA appointment. 6E, amended CSEA appointment. And 6F, amended CSEA appointment. May I have a motion, please?
I move it.
1 second.
Any discussion?
These are essentially clerical corrections in our appointments. So Dmitry Fedorov, Yasmin Sekunjanin, and Jen Ivy are already board approved and doing a wonderful job for us in their respective roles. This is just an amendment to comply with civil service requirements on their probationary periods.
No other comments? Please vote.
Seven, yes.
7B is not under consent, so the recommended action is a motion to acknowledge February 3rd through the 7th, 2025 as National School Counseling Week.
Or wait, you have to go back to 6B,
Yes, 6B and C2 or just B?
just B.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
Wow.
We have a retirement coming.
Oh, I didn't say that one. Excuse me. Recommended action: upon recommendation of the superintendent, accept the retirement of Tina Stubbs, teaching assistant at the elementary school, effective June 30th, 2025. May I have a motion, please?
I'll motion it.
Any discussion?
I need a second.
Oh.
Fine.
I got
I didn't hear you wave.
Tina's served the district faithfully for the last 10 years at the elementary school, and she's been a real support to the kids and a valued member of the team, and we wish her well in her future endeavors.
That's great.
7, yes.
Moving on to additional action items. 7A, C, E, F, and G are all under consent. Now I'll go back to 7B. Recommended action for the National School Counseling Week is a motion to acknowledge February 3rd to the 7th, 2025 as National School Counseling Week. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you to all of our counselors. Any other comments?
No, just thank you to Deanna and Connie and Lynn. They do a great job for us.
Please vote.
Seven, yes.
7D,
Did I miss 6C?
Was that in personnel, the
It was
resignation?
in consent.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
You voted for it.
moving on to 7D, recommended action upon the recommendation of the superintendent. Approve the resolution related for sale of school district property no longer needed for school purposes as per the attached resolution. May I have a motion, please?
I will move that.
Second.
Any further discussion on this topic? If not, please vote.
Pick up.
7, yes.
Moving on to linking goals with agenda items, who has some goals that we've met this evening? Anyone? Students first and foremost, with all of the activities coming up with Winter Carnival, and certainly the budget process that we went through this evening. Let's not be shy, you all have something.
Well, I think community outreach is shipping, topic. We're gonna get into discussion on the budgets, but also on the auditorium for the finance situation.
I think that the Rotary, that comes under probably community outreach, what they're doing. If there are any other additional, feel free to reach out to Karen at the conclusion of our meeting. Moving into the second, good of the cause. Anything online, Karen?
No.
Anyone in person have anything they'd like to add? If not, our next meeting date and location is February 18th. We may have a work session if needed. It's not on there currently. So I think we'll plan to meet at our regular time at 5 p.m. unless there's an update. Any old agenda topics? Any new hot topics that we should add? If not, recommended action is a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing the employment history of certain personnel. May I have a motion, please?
I move it. I'll second.
Vote.
Do we need to exit? Direct.
Yes, thank you.
Read the tea leaves on that.
Thank you for coming out on this
Yeah,
snowy
sure.
evening. We
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you for having us.
Yeah, we like to have people come. Thank you.
I'm waiting for Doug and Ron.